Welcome to RCAM. I'm your host, Ryan, and thank you for tuning in today. So, today we are going to be continuing our stream of Matt Walsh's interview with Tucker Carlson. I just thought it was really rich and just full of different things that I could just expand on. And I just thought the conversation was really insightful and needed, especially for young men. I think it needed to be had, and the skeptics of Israel and Matt's stance on that. So I want to continue that conversation. Also, just giving you guys the heads up, I am experimenting with my new Stream Deck, so I'm pretty stoked for it. So I will be I will be pressing buttons and yeah, so that'll be cool. So hopefully that will enhance my streams and make them a little bit better. So just bear with me as I'm working out any kinks that may be going on with it. So before we get into today's content, though, please like, share, subscribe, click that notification bell to stay notified every time we go live. And we go live every Monday through Saturday at 9 p.m. All right, so I guess we're just gonna jump into this and continue this conversation because I think it's good. So I believe we left off just as they were about to get into the marijuana conversation, which is something that I have some thoughts on. I have some thoughts on marijuana, and they're not good. And I think Matt teased this off really well.
Which is not how I mean it.
Where are you on marijuana?
I think it's awful. I think it's terrible. I used to have a more kind of libertarian view of it.
Yeah.
If you were to go back 10 years, 15 years, my view was I don't like it personally, but
you were never a weed smoker.
I've had it. I've never been years and years and years ago. Not in adulthood. It's not for me. It's not for me. But and my view used to be, well, it's not for me, but probably all this, I kind of bought into the war on drugs thing and all this money that we're spending to try to stop people from smoking it is a waste. And so it should probably just be legal, even if I don't like it. There's this argument from the marijuana fans that, well, it's no different from than alcohol. And we know how prohibition of alcohol worked out.
It's actually a lot different than alcohol. You know, I know a lot of people, try to make the case like it's harmless, but it's not actually harmless, okay? Marijuana is actually a psychoactive drug, and nobody talks about that, or a hallucinogenic drug. Nobody talks about that. Nobody mentions that as being a side effect of long-term pot smoking. Nobody mentions that. But it does, and it could cause latent psychological issues to surface. And I think overall, it just negatively affects people in a very subtle way where they might not even initially realize it. But it's only after you have stopped smoking for a lengthy period of time where you realize, like, oh, like that negatively impacted me. I mean, that changed the way I thought. And it does change the way that people think. It rewires your brain in a way that I think makes you a little bit more lazy. It makes ambition just out of your reach, where you have great ideas, but your execution is lackluster at best. And I think it has serious detrimental impacts on a person's mental health. I think it exasperates mental health problems, depression, anxiety, paranoia. I think it adds to all those things. I think the cons of it certainly outweigh the benefits.
And so if we're going to allow people to go out and get a drink, why shouldn't they be able to go
Worked
out?
out pretty well, I think. I think cirrhosis deaths went way down, didn't they? I mean, they did.
Yeah. So I'm not convinced by the argument for that reason. I'm also not entirely convinced that alcohol and marijuana are comparable. For one thing, an alcohol can be really bad, and there's addiction, and it can destroy families and lives. Alcohol is, though, at least a more social. It's a social lubricant.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're with a group of people and you're having a drink, it can help you kind of loosen up. You have a better time as long as you're not being excessive. Now, if somebody gets trashed, then it kind of ruins the time for everyone, and that can happen. I think marijuana is not like that. It kind of turns you inward. It makes you antisocial, you know. So if you're sitting around a table with some people and a couple of them are drinking a beer, even if you're not drinking, you can have a perfectly nice time. But if you're sitting around a table and a couple of the people are stoned, it's like it's lame. You don't even want to talk to that person. They have nothing to contribute.
Yeah. Does seem to isolate people.
Yeah, I think it's isolating. I think it turns you inward. But regardless of all that, my opinion was, yeah, it should probably just be legal. But I also believe in when you get new data, you get new facts, you need to analyze them. You need to be willing to change your mind. And so we have legalized it in many places across the country, in many cities. And I've been to these cities, as many of us have, where weed is now, it's like cigarettes were 30 years ago. Everybody's smoking. And
can we stop and talk about how awful it smells too? I mean, really. Yeah. It's kind of hard to believe that I used to smoke that garbage, you know? Like I was wild in high school. And I can't believe I didn't notice how awful it smelled. I actually thought it smelled good at the time, but now not having, not done it in many, many, many years, the smell of it is putrid to me. It smells disgusting. I remember once I was working at one of my old jobs in New York, and somebody came in and they smelled like pot, but it was so bad I wanted to throw up. And I just like the cognitive dissonance that's disconnecting them from realizing how bad they smell is truly another awful unintended consequence of this drug, and it being kind of everywhere. I remember going out to Small Coles when I was working in supported housing to talk to clients, and it reeked of pot there. Apartments reeked of pot. There was really nowhere you could go to get away from it. And it's just awful. And, and now I'm living down south, but occasionally even down here, I'll get a whiff of it. I'm like, Jesus, it's awful. It smells awful.
I think the early returns are not good.
You don't think Denver and New York are pretty great?
I really don't. I think they're it's quite terrible. It's not all because of weed, but just the experience of walking around, everybody's high, it reeks of weed everywhere. How has this made anyone's life better? That's my question. That's what I want to know. I'd be willing to adjust my view on this. And I've asked this question before. I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer. But we've made weed legal in a lot of these places. In what way has it measurably improved life anywhere now that it's legal?
And you want to know another argument that frustrates me with the pro-weed people? All right, so a lot of people are like, well, I use it for medicinal purposes. Shut up. No, you don't. You're not using it you are not getting stoned for medicinal purposes. Every single person that I know that claimed to use it for medicinal purposes was getting stoned and doing other drugs. So shut up. You're being dishonest. Just admit you just want to get high. That's it. That's all. You just want to get high. I would respect that position more than claiming that it's for medicinal reasons and that you're self-medicating. No. You're just getting stoned. You're just a drug addict. That's it. You're not self-medicating. You're just a drug addict. And I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you can take, if you wanted to use it for medication, you can actually extract, I think, the THC and take it without the component that gets you stoned. And there's medicinal properties in that. But that's not what they're doing. No, they're lighting a joint, smoking, getting high, and claiming they're medicating themselves.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's degraded people to the point where they're very easy to control. Don't you think that's an upside? So if you're like running criminal enterprise posing as a government and you don't want people to rebel violently against you, then you give them drugs so they won't.
And if I was in a position of power politically, then maybe I'd feel that way. But for me,
I mean, that does like take 3 steps back. Like, what is this? The whole population is like addled with something, you know.
And I don't want to just hate on pot because our whole culture as a whole is dependent on, if it's not pot, or, illegal drugs, well, they're getting the legal drugs and they're hooked up on, antidepressants and stimulants and all sorts of pharmaceutical drugs. And that's not bad. I'm not saying that's better. All right. That's certainly not better. Okay. That's just as bad. And there's problems with these pharmaceutical drugs too. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like pot is, the answer. And, I think it was illegal for a reason. And I think, the ad campaigns about your brain, being on drugs and then them showing a fried egg. I think that propaganda is probably onto something because I meet some people and I would rather talk to an egg than talk to them because they're just vacant, gone, and there's just no depth there.
Ladies are on benzos, the kids are on amphetamines, the young men are on weed.
Yeah.
Like no one's in his right mind, but everybody's kind of grooving out to his own music, and testosterone levels have just like dropped through the floor. And so probably not going to have an insurrection when everyone's high, right?
Yeah. It makes people compliant. It makes them apathetic, even more than I think people just sort of naturally are these days. And of course, in reality, these are all bad things. So it kind of goes back to how has it made anyone's life better? And
right.
And I don't know. I'm a simple person. Maybe I can be guilty of being simplistic sometimes. So if that's the case, then guilty as charged. But to me, it's like I think a policy is bad if it makes people's lives worse and doesn't improve anything.
What if it works in theory? What if it's a beautiful theory?
Well, theories are great. Then we can talk about it. Then it's a lot of fun to talk about.
It's like that famous the de Gaulle line, which I think is probably fake. We know it works in practice. The question is, does it work in theory?
Yeah.
And I do feel like that's in operation in the United States. It's like, well, people have the right to X, Y, or Z, therefore we're doing this. And it's like, actually, that's a disaster. But people have a right. You know what I mean? It's like there's no reference point in reality there. It's just like the theory makes sense. Let's go with it.
Yeah, and that's why I increasingly, when people start talking about their rights, it doesn't mean a lot to me. I don't even know what people mean when they say it. I'm not trying to be pedantic, but the next time someone says, well, I have a right to this, just ask them, well, what do you mean you have a right to it? What does that mean?
Oh, I know.
That's a good question to ask. I also, when it comes to the rights argument, I don't think so. One, I believe that we are all born with inalienable rights, given to us by our, creator, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that whole thing. But I also don't think our rights should ever be contingent on another person. So like a lot of people will advocate that human beings have the right to medical care. No. You don't actually have the right to medical care. It's nice. We all want it. I want it. Like I want medical care if I'm in a crisis, but I don't have a right to it. And you want to know why I don't have a right to it? Because that right would be contingent on the service of another person. So when you're advocating for the right to medical care, you're advocating for the right to doctors, no matter what. If it's a right, it has to be guaranteed to you, which means that person is now beholden to you so that you can have that right. And that doesn't seem right to me. That seems wrong. And if a right requires another person to uphold it, that sounds like you're putting that person in slavery and bondage. And I don't think that doesn't jive well with me. I believe, healthcare is a privilege. I do think, obviously you need to do things to make it more affordable, but I don't think it's a right. But I do think his question here about what are rights is a very good one that we should ask people that advocate for all kinds of rights for everything, rights to get high. I happen to believe that we have the right to choose to do good in the world. We have the right to choose righteousness or choose lawlessness. But when we choose sin, when we use our freedom to practice sin, well, then we are enslaved. We choose slavery, we choose bondage. And I believe that, people that choose righteousness are walking in actual freedom, which is kind of cool. But that's like a whole theological thing I can get in on.
They really have they don't know what they're saying. I think the vast majority of people talking about their rights, if you ask them to define the word right, they would not be able to do it.
Or define anywhere. What's white supremacy? What's racism? What's anti-Semitism? What is any word used as a cudgel to make people be quiet and control them? No one ever is forced to define what the term means.
Right.
In fact, there are even laws that I'm, around those questions that are laws. They carry punishments, and the term is never defined.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a trend where language isn't used to communicate, it's used to control, and therefore it has to remain not fully defined.
My sociology professor, God rest his soul, he passed away this past year. He came up with these rules for life, basically. And one of them was that people are symbol shifting magicians, meaning they change language in order to suit whatever agenda or goal or purpose that they're trying to accomplish. And the left has done a terrific job doing just that. They have changed language in a way to say these things that sound on the surface fine, but when you look a little bit deeper, you're like, what are you even talking about? Like this concept of racism. Like, what does that even mean? Like they've made everything racist. Owning dogs is racist. Bird watching racist. Being good at math racist. So, when they're talking about racism, it's hard to actually be able to discern what they even mean when they say that. Matt Walsh asked the famous question, what is a woman? Because they don't even know what that is. I can define a woman. I know what that means. But they don't. And then they try to usurp language and use it against people.
Right. And that's why I think all I can do in response to that is if it's one of these terms that doesn't mean anything anymore, then it's not persuasive to me in an argument.
Right.
It's a term that has become not useful. And it may have been useful at a time. It may even be a term that used to have a definition or should have a definition.
Right.
But there are a lot of terms that are just not useful anymore in a conversation because they don't clarify anything. They don't.
What?
Well, right. Rights. That's one. It's just not. Yeah. I'm not saying rights don't exist. I'm saying it's not a useful term in a conversation most of the time, because when somebody says, "Oh, I have a right to this," I don't know what they mean by that, and I think they don't know what they mean by that.
Right. Well, I don't think they care, actually.
Yeah. But also racism, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, any of the isms. These are not useful terms anymore, because when you're calling someone racist, that doesn't tell me anything about him, actually. No. It could be if you're pointing to a guy saying that guy's racist, maybe he thinks that all black people are inferior and should be enslaved. That's racist. So maybe that's what you're telling me about him. But you could be trying to tell me that that's a guy who understands that young black males are disproportionately violent, and he has pointed that out. So you could be using the term to describe that also, which is not actually racist at all. So when you say racist, I don't know what you mean. So it's not a useful term. You need to be more specific.
It means something.
Yeah, these words mean nothing, man. People call me transphobe. I've been called transphobic. Good God, too many times. I'm not afraid of trans people. I don't know I'm not afraid of them. I think they're insane. I'm afraid for them. But afraid of, I'm not afraid of least intimidating person in the world is a cross-dressing man. That they're pathetic. They're not, I'm not afraid of them. But they'll use it to mean you hate them. I don't hate them either. I think they're wildly confused and lost in their sin, but I don't hate them. I hate what they do. I hate that they, they are participating in something that's abominable. I hate that. Yeah, guilty. But I don't hate them. So they use that word against you, and this is what they try to ultimately do with these words. Racism and homophobe and transphobe and anti-Semite. All these things they try to use to demonize a person and shut down conversation because they think that those words still hold the weight they did, 5 years ago. And I'm here to say, no, actually, I don't. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care. I don't care what you think of me. I don't. You know what? I've recently been called a misogynist. You think I hate women? One, that's retarded on its face value. I don't hate women. I love them. I love women. I married a woman. What are you talking about? I hate women. Stupid. But they'll use this as a way, to suggest that being masculine is inherently a bad thing, and that I need to listen to women, which what they really mean when they say that is listen to feminists. Don't listen. They're not encouraging you to listen to women like Candace Owens or Allie Beth Stuckey or Lila Rose. Or Brittany Martinez or any these conservative women. No, they mean like feminist women. No, listen to feminist women, and they've been saying the same garbage and nonsense for the past 50 years. I don't care what they have to say, actually, at all. I'm not interested. We've been listening, and society is a lot worse off now than it has ever been. So, yeah, no, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to conservative women, godly women, women with the spirit of God inside of them. Those are the women that I will listen to, not feminists. Anyway, side rant.
Something I don't like.
Right.
Like something that gets in my way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're saying there's something about that guy that I don't like.
Yeah, right. I want this thing, and you're between me and this thing, and how do I get you out of my way? How do I incapacitate or destroy you so I can get what I want? You're racist, or any of those other terms. Like,
right.
You're in the way.
Exactly.
I should have asked you this, but I'm interested if you don't mind. What is your spiritual practice at home? Like you educate your children, you and your wife,
mm-hmm.
I assume your wife primarily, educates your children. But as head of household, how do you think about your requirements as like the spiritual leader of your home?
Yeah, well, we're Catholic. So, and we pray together every night as a family, which I think is and we can get lazy about that. I think a lot of families do, but I think it's really important. It doesn't have to be anything, it doesn't need to be a 2-hour routine, but
you say your prayers before bed.
Right.
Yeah.
As a family.
All of you, all 8 of you.
Yeah, well, not the babies. The 2-year-olds, they get out of it for now. But
but basically, you've got a whole congregation.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I think it's important to be on your knees. This is just a bodily,
physically.
Yeah, physically on our knees, and
why?
Because it's a symbol of humility and submission before God. Now, you don't have to be on your knees to pray. There's a perfectly valid prayer if you're not on your knees. But if you can, I think you should be, and I think it's a good image for the kids to see. It's a good image. It's good for my kids to see me on my knees praying. It's good for them to see that.
Why?
Because to my kids, I am the authority figure in the home. I don't answer to anybody in the home. I don't have to ask anyone's permission for anything. And I'm ultimately like the source of discipline in the home as the father, as I should be. But for them to see that, oh, even that guy, even dad, who in the home, this is his castle, but even he is showing submission and obedience and humility towards some power above him. I think that's a really powerful image for my kids to have, and that I had with my own dad growing up.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. Now, I pray with my family. I don't know if we necessarily, we don't pray all together before we go to sleep, but sometimes we do. I mean, when we put our little girl to bed, or our youngest to bed, probably at like 7:30, we all prayed together. It wasn't just super structured prayer, but we prayed together. And usually every night when I put my oldest daughter to bed, I pray for her. So we pray as often as we can together. And it is good for your children to see you as a man, as a father, humbling yourself before God. Willing to get on your knees and pray, and prostrate yourself before Him and yield to an authority that is higher than you. Yeah, I do think that sends a good message to the children that you esteem God above all, and that you are willing to submit to God, and that you're willing to submit your family to God. And it also sends a message too that you, as a man who is demonstrating humility toward God, should be somebody who is respected as the authority and leader of your household, and expect the same um, from your kids and from your spouse. This is the hierarchy that God sets up. It's God, father, wife, children, all under that covering. And I think when families have their relationships established in that way, it leads to the flourishing of the nuclear family, the family that God has ordained.
So, so we do that. And I think this is also, I think I'm at the point where it's kind of like my whole ideology, my political ideology at this point is that I want my kids to go to heaven. I want my kids to go to heaven, and I want them to be good and happy people. That's what I want. So everything that we do in the home, and we're not perfect. We don't get this right perfectly, not even close to it, but everything we do in the home should be tailored towards that end, to help our kids be good and happy people.
Yeah, man, this is real. This is biblical. I mean, train your child up in the way that they should go, and they will not depart from it. And we're supposed to teach them to fear the Lord, and that's the beginning of wisdom. And children who fear the Lord, are going to ultimately aim to do what is right, to be good, moral, and upright people. Joshua, I believe it's 1:6 or 2:6. It says, "Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Be careful to meditate on it day and night, and do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful." It's our responsibility, our task as believers is to train up our children to be morally upright. And we need, God's standard of righteousness, ultimately fulfilled through Jesus Christ, to be able to do that. And when we are spirit empowered and God's spirit is moving through us and through them, then they will do that. They will be obedient to what He says, and they will be people that transform this world for the better, and do what is good and what is beautiful, and stay away from what is evil. And our ultimate hope, is their salvation. And my hope above that, above just their salvation, is for them to take that gospel message and bring it to every single person who has ears to hear. That is the duty of a father, is to train their children. Teach their family. Be good and upright men. Setting and raising a standard for a godless generation. That is what we are called to do. And I think Matt is definitely touching on this.
And that's also, those are the policies that I support. Those are my politics.
Sounds like Christian nationalism, Matt.
Guilty as charged. I'm a nationalist. I'm a Christian. So
another term I have never heard defined.
I just got called this yesterday. Like, oh no, I want to live in a Christian nation. Sue me. You know, they use it like a slur, an insult. "Oh, you're a Christian nationalist." Yeah, I want to live in a Christian nation governed by, Christian values and laws and ethics. Yeah, because it's good. It's good. And so much of it we already do naturally. Like that's our natural inclination. And people are so averse to it, but it's meant for our good, you know?
Well, that's wow. What an interesting way to frame it. What a great way to frame it. What do you think of as your duties as a husband and father?
I think it's provide. We talked about gender roles, so I do believe that the father should be the provider in more ways than one. You're providing financially, like bringing home the bacon is a really important part of that, and I think that the father should do that.
You know what the Bible says too about a father that's not, or a husband father that's not willing to provide for his family? The Bible says that he is worse than an unbeliever. Yeah, that's a hard truth that I think a lot of men, especially Christian men, need to hear. A man of God that does not provide for his own family, according to Scripture, is worse than an unbeliever. You're worse than an atheist in God's eyes, which should cause you to have your priorities straight and start working the plow to provide for your family. That is one of the things that we are tasked to do from the very beginning, is to work the ground, to be fruitful. And Proverbs and Psalms has a lot to say about laziness, about idle hands. And it's something that I think is missing in the church. You have a lot of these. I mean, even pastors, that living below the poverty line and not providing for their family and putting all their efforts into the church while their own family is morally bankrupt and financially bankrupt, while reneging on their responsibility to be a provider for the family. Provide for your family first, and then with the overflow of that, be a blessing to those around you. But your first and foremost priority is obviously to God and then to your own family. And if you fail at that, if you fail at being a provider for your family, you are a pathetic man. That is your job. That is your task. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if it's something that is hard. You do it.
But you're also providing safety, security.
You're protecting.
And I know when you say that, it sounds like, well, that's easy, because like what are the chances that I'm actually gonna have to fight off some bad guy that breaks in the house? It's not. It could happen. It's not impossible.
They're increasingly high, actually.
Yeah, increasingly high. But I haven't had to do it yet, and maybe I'll never have to do it. I hope I never have to do it. But it's not just about that. As a man, you should be, I believe, a stabilizing presence to your family. Like when they're around you, they should just feel safer and calmer. And not necessarily because they're worried that a bad guy is going to. That's part of it, but it's not just that. Like the world's a confusing place. The world is a dark place. Everyone has anxieties. And when you're there, they should just feel calmer and better having you around. And if something goes wrong, if there's, the shit hits the fan, there's a problem, they should be able to know that, okay, well, thank God Dad's here, or thank God my husband's here. And I think that's one of the central duties of a father, which means
as a man, you need to be the type of person that other people can depend upon during a time of crisis, especially your family. You need to be the one that is able to keep it together, keep a level head, not get emotional, and portray confidence so that the people around you aren't shaken. And courage inspires courage. But if you're the type of man who is bending to the pressures of life and you are visibly displaying that to your family, you're going to create a sense of uncertainty. It's going to put them at unease. And that's not the type of man that you want to be. I can confidently say that. So if that's not the type of person you want to be the type of person that is dependable during a time of crisis. Be the type of person that can bring a calm to the people around you in the midst of tragedy. Or they can look at you and they can be confident. They can know that you're handling the situation. And that even if you're uncertain, that you're going to see to it that you're going to figure things out. You don't have to know everything, but you have to be committed to figuring out the best course of action and bringing that calm to your family.
That, we've gotten away from, in large part in this society, we've gotten away from, we don't talk about stoicism as a virtue anymore at all. No one really talks about that. I happen to believe in it a lot. I may take it a little bit too far. Maybe I err too much in that direction. But
if you had cancer, you wouldn't tell anybody?
Correct.
I admire that.
If I was, it's easy to say, but I think if I was dying of cancer right now, you would not know, and I would never tell anybody.
Why?
Because it's not your burden.
Everybody knows a good.
That's hardcore. And that's pretty hardcore. I don't know if I would be, because yes, it's not your family's burden. I get that. I mean, to a degree, because it could be, it could end up being their burden, especially if they're caught blindsided. So I don't know if I would necessarily go that far as to not tell my family I had like cancer or something like that, but if I did, tell them, they would not know the degree of which, I would struggle with it, because I wouldn't want them to for a second to think that I was afraid of cancer or dying. I would want them to enjoy each and every single moment with me. So you portray, you portray strength in that moment. That is a time to demonstrate strength. Now I don't think, you should tell social media, unless absolutely necessary. I don't think it's anybody's business for the most part. Now I do think, there are people that do share their story as a source of encouragement for others. And I think that's good. I think for the most part, try to keep it to yourself if possible. I think of, what is it, the guy that Chadwick, I think is his name, that played Black Panther. He had cancer and nobody knew. And I just thought, like, that guy was strong. He was courageous. He kept on acting as if everything was okay, until he drew his last breath. And that's admirable. It is. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
10% off in honor of President Trump, an American company, a great product. I have seen this firsthand, including recently, and I vehemently agree with you. And I think it's a gender specific thing. I think that's a man's burden.
Absolutely,
not to whine.
Yeah.
But I've seen it in a very profound way. It changed my life actually seeing it. But I haven't thought through why it's important, but I know that it is. It sounds like you have thought through why that's important. Why is it?
Well, it goes back to what I said, that as the man, you should be a stabilizing, protective force in the house. You should be a calming force in the house for your family. You should be relieving their anxieties to the extent that you can. if you are verbalizing all of your many complaints and your anxieties, then you've inverted that. Now you're looking to your wife and your children
exactly
to sort of carry that burden.
It's your emotional.
See, this is where I do disagree a little bit. All right. So one, like I can't lie to my wife. All right. And like let's pretend tomorrow I got cancer, right? I find out I got my diagnosis. I choose to not tell my wife and then go at it alone. Well, what happens though when like one day you're at dinner and you cough up blood, and maybe your wife sees, that would be unsettling to her. So I think the better approach would be to actually be honest with her, but not use her as a source, or your family. Maybe the kids don't need to know, but your wife certain I do think deserves to know. But not so that she can carry that burden, so that she can mentally prepare herself and even pray. It's like my wife is a prayer warrior. She is, man. She prayed that I got a grill for free. It sounds vain. It sounds stupid, but she prayed for me to have a grill for my birthday, and we got blessed with like the Mercedes Benz of grills. We got this bull grill for $3,000. It's because my wife sought the Lord in prayer. And it's like when you have a godly oriented family, that's what you do. I would not go to my wife and be like, I can't believe I got cancer, and cry to her. No, I'd be like, listen, hon, this is the reality of the situation, but I trust the Lord, and we're gonna get through this. You don't have to worry. You don't have to panic. We're gonna deal with this. And I would demonstrate a sense of peace for my family, and confidence in my family that I'm not going to be shaken by cancer or anything. You be honest, and you cast your burdens into the Lord, and you that's an opportunity where you get together and you pray as a family, and then watch God show up. But I think hiding that doesn't do any good for your family, at least your wife. If she physically sees you withering away and doesn't know why, I think she'd at least deserve to know. And I don't know if he means it that far, but if he does, I don't agree.
Support animals,
right, and you're turning to them to carry this.
Totally right.
And I don't believe in that, and I think that that it's just different. Women, it's not the same for a woman. I think that women are much more relational. Women share. They're feminine. We used to say the fairer, gentler sex, and so it's just a different thing. And I also think for women, now most women, I think, have been conditioned that they aren't allowed to say this part out loud, but I think it's true that they also don't really want a man who's going to complain and open up to them too much. I know
can you say that one more time?
They don't want a man
at a higher volume, because I think that men need to hear this.
Right. We have been conditioned to believe that opening up and sharing your emotions is just a good thing.
Crying in front of your girlfriend.
Right.
She really wants you to cry.
That's what we've been told. and your girlfriend might tell you that. She might tell you, oh, you know what? I really want you to open up more.
Nope. Don't.
But what's she thinking inside?
Right.
He's such a bitch.
Yes. That's why you never cry in front of your wife or your girlfriend. Like never. I mean, in the rarest of cases, you have a close family member dies. That's one thing. Your daughter walking down the aisle, but other than that, just never cry in front of them.
I think Jesus actually models this pretty well in the Bible. He gives us some important cues on when it is and is not appropriate to cry. So when his friend Lazarus dies, and he's feeling the weight of everybody's grief and the fact that his friend is dead. He cries. This famous scripture, Jesus wept. And I think that was the perfect demonstration of an appropriate time for a man to cry. Another appropriate time so when men are facing burdens, I don't think we should be putting that on other people, especially our wives or spouses. And the other time Jesus cries is in the garden when he's feeling the weight of sin and he's feeling the weight of the cup, and he's crying tears of blood, to demonstrate how stressed he is, but he doesn't put that on his disciples. No, he brings that to God. So it's like, yeah, you can have these moments where if you're feeling stressed at work, or something chaotic is happening and you're feeling overwhelmed, you bring that to the Lord, and you draw close to him during that moment, but you do not, under any circumstance, put that on your wife or your kids. You need to be that emotionally stabilizing force for your household. And yeah, I agree with what he says about crying in front of women. They will automatically lose respect for you. They will. It's just the way that it is. They don't actually want vulnerability as much as they claim. They want strong men, men that they can count on, men that are emotional at appropriate times, like funerals and, maybe, like Walsh said, daughter walking down the aisle, but they don't want a blubbering idiot as a husband. They don't want it.
Especially not because you're stressed out, because you're just dealing with some kind of anxiety. And people think that this is extreme, or they want to pretend that, well, if women can cry, the men can cry. But just I like imagine a scenario. Let's say you're in the car and the weather gets really bad, and then you get lost. Maybe the GPS goes out, and you're lost. Weather's bad. It's really stressful. One of those stressful things. It's dark. It would not be uncommon in that scenario if you're with your wife, she might start crying, like she's very nervous. She starts crying. Oh my gosh, we're lost. What are we going to do? And that would not be an uncommon thing. And as a man, you don't think less of your wife for that. Hopefully you're there to comfort her and say, no, I got this. We're going to be fine. We got it. Now you as the man, if you started crying because you're stressed out and lost and it's dark and it's raining and you don't know where you're going, and your wife saw that, she will never look at you the same way again. She will always remember that. She'll remember the time when it was stressful and she needed you to take over and be in control and figure it out, and you started crying like a little bitch. She will always remember it. And I think we all intuitively understand that. We understand that it's okay. In that scenario, for the woman to cry is normal. For the man to cry, it's ridiculous. It's shameful.
But it's interesting.
Not only with crying too. So it's not just crying. I think a man needs to be emotionally stable. I mean, a man needs to be in control of his emotions. He needs to be disciplined, not just with crying. All right. Anger. All right. It's not just emasculating to be somebody that cries all the time. It's also emasculating to be somebody that has angry outbursts, who doesn't have a handle on his rage. That is unbecoming behavior of a man. A man should be able to channel his anger appropriately. All right. So, a good example is Jesus. Jesus was angry for the right reason when the money changers were making a mockery of his father's temple. He angrily chased them out. That was an appropriate anger. It was a righteous anger. An inappropriate anger, and I'm going to use a personal example. I got short the other day with my 2-year-old, and I'm ashamed of it. What was I? I was trying to put film on the door, and I don't know. That film that blocks out the door. I tried to, we have glass windows, so I wanted to put this film on, and she kept like messing the film up as I was trying to put it. I got frustrated. It's like, I yelled at her, and I felt bad after. I'm like, this is, that was not appropriate. I told, my 7-year-old or my 6-year-old and my 2-year-old, even though she probably didn't understand me, that wasn't appropriate, and I should not have lost my cool. That is a masculine behavior. It's not the way that a man should conduct themselves. You're supposed to be level-headed and calm, and that's something that, like in moments, I'm very good at not crying. But sometimes I do let my anger get the best of me, but that also is not okay. So like I'm acknowledging that behavior is not good. It's unbecoming of a man. So we need to have a handle on that and demonstrate anger at appropriate times. And you have a lot of these men that are just chronically angry, and they fly off the handle at the drop of a hat. Now, it takes me a while to get angry. I don't want anyone to be watching this to think like, oh, Ryan just, flips out or rages out. No, like I have to be like having a bad day, it's like, moon has to line to get me that point, because I'm generally like a pretty easygoing, relaxed guy. um you know but even in those moments, though, there's no excuse for it, and it just means that needs to be an area where I'm more disciplined with. And if you're a man that struggles with anger issues, or you're overly emotional, and you're crying all the time, you got to get it. You got to get a handle on it. All right. You have to become disciplined. Maybe watch a bunch of sad movies and show restraint so that you don't start crying. But you have to get a handle on your emotions, or work out whatever issue you're facing that is leading you to be emotional.
Interesting that you said at the outset we've been told the opposite, and it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, it is, that all the ingredients in a successful marriage and family, and in fact in a successful life, have been systematically targeted by the people in charge and their proxies for destruction. So like everything you need to know to have a successful life has been undermined. Like, no, you definitely cry in front of your wife. Like, show your feelings. No, she should go get a higher paying job than you. Like, you should do more of the housework. Like, you need to be the woman actually in the relationship. No, it's totally fine to spend all Saturday playing video games while getting high or whatever. Like, we're getting not just like 3 degrees off good advice, but we're getting 180 degrees opposite advice. It's like our society, it's not like our society has been targeted intentionally for destruction.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why. Where does that come from? If you read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, which came out, I think, in the early 60s, over 50 years ago, that book is like a recipe for destroying a society, and yet it was promoted. That's sort of the root of modern feminism. What is that? Is it spiritual? Are these like spiritual forces working to destroy the West? Are they, what, do you have any clue? It's so comprehensive.
Yeah.
Everything you said is the opposite of what your kids are taught in school.
It's certainly a spiritual attack. This all feels demonic because it is.
It is demonic. I mean, they're trying to ultimately rob men and women of their God-given identities. We were created and designed for specific purposes. Men were meant to work and create things with our hands. That's what we were supposed to do. We were meant to be strong and to be stoic and to be the leading spiritual force in our family. That's what we were called to do. That was what we were entrusted to do. And women were created to be mothers. They were given this profound gift to bring life into the world, and they forsook that on the altar of their careers. And it's a problem because society has been inverted. And they tried to make us swap roles that are not swappable, are not interchangeable, and treat us just like we are the same. And we are not the same. Doesn't mean that we aren't inherently all valuable. Yes, of course. but we have different roles, and that's a beautiful thing. But when it's inverted, when it's usurped, when it's undermined, yeah, it does lead to destruction. It is, and it's deeply spiritual.
In my opinion. It's also, it's all an effort, I think, to destroy the family, to upend the fundamental societal institution, which is the family. Because all of the, nefarious forces that want to control us, want to control what we do, control what we think, control what our children think. The family is an enemy to them. The family is the one thing standing in the way.
Yeah.
And so it's all about destroying the family. Even the things that seem little, like it's okay to cry in front of your wife.
No, it's not.
It's not. And that again, that's an attack on the family, because if a man takes that advice and starts acting feminine and emotional, it's going to hurt his marriage. It might destroy his marriage.
Yes.
Or his prospects at marriage. He could be dating a wonderful woman. She's really into him. Suddenly he takes a woman's advice and is vulnerable in front of her and cries, and she gets off-put and turned off, and boom, there goes his opportunity at finding a spouse. So yeah, it's not a small thing. And don't let these stupid feminists and treat you or treat it like it's no big deal. No, it is a big deal.
And so that's the ultimate goal. And I think a lot of it, you mentioned feminism. I think a lot of this does go back to feminism. I think that
it was way more destructive than any plague in history.
Well, feminism, by far and away, is the most destructive ideology in human history. It's not even close.
I agree with that. Why do you say that?
Well, let's start with the body count. 60 million dead babies since Roe, just in this country. And if we're talking worldwide, hundreds of millions. But in this country, 60 million children were killed through abortion, which is the feminist sacrament. So you don't even need to go beyond that. That's kind of enough, I think, to make the point. But of course you can. Ever since feminism took hold, divorce rates have skyrocketed. Birth rates have plummeted. We're watching the disintegration of the family unit in real time.
All you need to see is that it goes and directly challenges what God has established from the beginning, to recognize that it is a force of great evil. God told us to be fruitful and multiply. Feminism doesn't say that. They not just discourage having children, but they encourage killing the children that they're blessed with in the womb. That's an issue. They seek to rule over men in the workplace, and to create a matriarchy, because they think the patriarchy is inherently bad, and they have to uproot it and undermine it at every turn. And it's really them just defying God.
And people are less happy. They're unhappy. As much as there's this cliche kind of image of the 1950s housewife who, was depressed, and all the Hollywood films are always like with this image of the housewife was depressed, and she was on whatever drugs secretly, and the husband was off having sex with the secretary, and most of that is just Hollywood. It's a Hollywood cartoon. And in reality, it's kind of the opposite. Now is when all that is happening. That the women are depressed, anxiety-riddled, on antidepressants. Men too. So, birth rates plummeting, 60 million dead babies, divorce rates skyrocketed. People are unhappy. They're on antidepressants. You don't need to go much farther.
No, you don't. So let's say you're emerging from adolescence into the world you're describing now. You're 18-year-old male. American born. What's your program? What's your advice to that kid? How do you make your way in this world? What do you do? How do you live a happy, meaningful life that gets you in the end to heaven, given that, you're facing these cultural headwinds? What would you do if you're 18 right now?
I would do the same thing that a version of what I did do. The roadmap is the same. Some of the obstacles are different. Some of the challenges are harder. Not all of them. In some ways, it's, there are some things that are easier about today than 300 years ago, certainly. So a lot of the challenges might be different, but the basic path is the same. And you can't give up on it, because to give up on it is despair. I mean, that's just giving up. So hold fast to your faith, number one. Number two, figure out what your vocation is, and you'll have a professional vocation, something you're supposed to be doing with your life, and go and pursue that no matter what it is, and no matter how hard it is. And also keep in mind that if you're 18 years old, and I say this to younger guys all the time, in many ways, I admit I'm quite happy that I'm not 18 years old, 20 years old in this environment. I am happy for that. And I'm certainly happy, thank God, that I'm already married, certainly. But you do have one huge advantage, one enviable advantage, which is the same advantage that every young man has had, that you're young, you're hopefully physically healthy, you're not married, you have no kids, you have no dependents. So it's very low stakes. And you can go anywhere and try anything, right? Like if you're looking around and saying, well, there are no jobs in my town, I can't find any jobs, go to a different town, go anywhere. You can go, and if you end up living in your car for a week or 2 months, it's not great. That sucks, but you can do that because it's just you. Now, for me, when I got 6 kids, so if things fall apart for me, it's much higher stakes. And it's not as simple as I can't just like go anywhere